Jungkook clutched the thin strap of his messenger bag tighter over his shoulder as he stepped into the gleaming marble lobby, heart pounding louder than the click of his shoes against the floor. Today was supposed to be a new beginning, his first day at Vantage Corporation, one of the most prestigious companies in Seoul. A fresh start. A clean slate. He just hadn't expected him to be waiting behind the executive desk. The elevator ride had felt endless, and yet when the doors finally opened to the top floor, time seemed to collapse around him. The massive office was bathed in natural light, framed by tall windows overlooking the city skyline. Every piece of furniture screamed money, power, control. And at the center of it all, leaning back casually in a dark leather chair, a file loosely held in one hand, sat the man Jungkook had thought he'd never see again. Kim Taehyung. The man whose tongue had been in his mouth. The man whose hands had held his hips down against leather seats. The man whose voice had whispered filthy, reckless things into his ear just 2 weeks ago. Jungkook's lungs tightened painfully. He watched as Taehyung's eyes lifted slowly from the file, unhurried, as if he already knew who was standing there, as if he had been waiting. Those dark, knowing eyes raked over Jungkook once, a mere flicker of recognition flashing, gone before anyone else might notice, but Jungkook felt it like a brand against his skin. No smirk. No wide-eyed shock. Just a lazy, almost cruel indifference, as if Jungkook were a stranger. Jungkook fought the urge to turn and bolt back into the elevator. Jungkook. Taehyung's voice was low and rich, a perfect match for the memory that still haunted Jungkook's dreams. Jungkook swallowed hard and stepped forward, hating the way his palms grew damp. Yes, sir, sir. The word tasted wrong in his mouth. Taehyung nodded once, then tossed the file onto the desk with casual disinterest. You're the new hire from the marketing division. Transferred from Busan, right? Yes, sir, Jungkook repeated, his voice steadier this time. Taehyung's eyes didn't blink, didn't twitch, didn't soften. They just pinned him there. A silent challenge. You report directly to me from now on, Taehyung said. I expect competence. Efficiency. Discretion. A pointed pause. Think you can manage that? Jungkook bristled, the undertone in Taehyung's words not lost on him. Was he warning him? Threatening him? I can, sir, Jungkook said tightly, bowing a little. Taehyung gave a single nod of approval and leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, muscles flexing under his tailored black dress shirt, sleeves pushed up to reveal strong forearms. Memories slammed into Jungkook's mind without mercy, fingers digging into his thighs. A rough voice murmuring, so pretty when you beg, the sharp bite of teeth against his collarbone. Jungkook's face burned. He dropped his gaze, willing the heat away. You'll be shadowing me closely for the next few weeks, Taehyung continued, oblivious, or pretending to be. I suggest you keep up. I will, sir, Jungkook mumbled, hating how small his voice sounded. Taehyung's mouth twitched, a fraction, a ghost of a smirk, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. Professional mask back in place. Good, Taehyung said simply. Assistant Choi will show you to your desk. Dismissed. Jungkook bowed stiffly and turned on his heel, biting the inside of his cheek hard enough to taste blood. The assistant, a bubbly woman named Choi Hana, chattered beside him as she led him through the maze of glass offices and minimalist decor, but Jungkook barely heard a word. His head was spinning. How was he supposed to survive this? How was he supposed to pretend that nothing had happened? How was he supposed to work for a man who had already had him, claimed him, then tossed him aside like a cheap memory? He slumped into his chair at his new desk and stared blankly at the computer screen. From the corner of his eye, through the glass wall of Taehyung's office, he saw the man glance up once, casually, their eyes meeting for a brief, electric second. Jungkook looked away first, shame curdling in his gut. It had been a good night. A wild, desperate, incredible night. But now, it was a mistake he couldn't take back. The hours dragged by like thick honey, each tick of the clock hammering into Jungkook's skull. He buried himself in spreadsheets, in marketing reports, in anything that would keep his hands busy and his mind numb. Anything that could drown out the lingering heat prickling under his skin. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't ignore the weight of Taehyung's presence just a few feet away. Couldn't forget the way those long fingers curled around a pen, the way his deep voice filled the air every time he gave instructions, calm and absolute. Every movement was torture. Every stolen glance a fresh wound. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair that Taehyung could sit there, so composed, so utterly unaffected, when Jungkook's entire world had been flipped upside down. Had that night really meant nothing to him? By the time noon rolled around, Jungkook's nerves were stretched thin. He jumped slightly when a low voice spoke behind him. "Jian Jungkook. Conference room." Now, he turned to see Taehyung already walking away without waiting for an answer, one hand shoved casually into his pocket. Jungkook scrambled after him, heart hammering painfully against his ribs. The conference room was massive, sleek, and cold. A long table stretched between them as Taehyung stood by the window, surveying the city like a king surveying his kingdom. He didn't turn around when he spoke. "You're tense," Taehyung said, voice deceptively mild. Jungkook stiffened. "I'm fine, sir," Taehyung hummed, low and skeptical. "Fine," he repeated, like he didn't believe a word of it. A long, heavy silence filled the room. Jungkook stared hard at the floor, fists clenching at his sides. He hated this. Hated feeling small. Hated feeling like he was the only one suffocating under the weight of what they had done. He needed to break the silence. To say something. Anything. Gathering his courage, Jungkook lifted his head, voice tight. "About that night," Taehyung turned then, sharp and sudden, cutting him off. "Forget it," he said, voice colder than steel. Jungkook's stomach twisted painfully. But Taehyung's eyes hardened, pinning him where he stood. "It meant nothing," Taehyung said, like it was a fact, like it was a corporate decision. "A mistake. We were drunk. It's over." The words sliced through Jungkook with brutal precision. He opened his mouth, to argue, to defend himself, to beg. He didn't even know, but no sound came out. Taehyung straightened his cuffs with methodical movements, like brushing Jungkook off was just another item on his to-do list. "You want to keep your job, don't you?" Jungkook swallowed the lump rising in his throat and nodded numbly. Taehyung's mouth twitched, something cold, something almost cruel. "Good," he said. "Then act like it never happened." By the time Jungkook stumbled out of the conference room, he felt hollow. He barely noticed Hana chattering about lunch options. Barely noticed the way other employees whispered and glanced their way. He sat at his desk, numb, staring at the computer screen until the words blurred together. The man who had kissed him like he was starving, who had touched him like he was precious, had thrown him away like garbage. And now, he was supposed to smile and nod and be the perfect employee, as if his heart wasn't trotting inside his chest. Jungkook laughed bitterly under his breath. He had been so stupid, so reckless. And now he would have to pay for it every single day. That night, in the suffocating silence of his tiny apartment, Jungkook curled into himself on the couch, phone clutched tightly in his hand. He scrolled back through his texts from that night, the drunken ones he had sent to his friends, the blurry photo he had snapped in the bar of Taehyung laughing with his head thrown back. And then the last text, the one he had sent to no one, unsent, sitting in his drafts. "I think I'm falling." Jungkook closed his eyes and deleted it. Deleted the photo. Deleted everything. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't delete the feeling. Couldn't erase the phantom touch of strong hands, the echo of a deep voice murmuring into his skin. And somewhere, deep in his gut, he knew this wasn't over. No matter how much Taehyung pretended. For the next few days, Jungkook became a ghost. He spoke only when spoken to, keeping his head down, keeping his distance. He forced his smiles, laughed at the right jokes, delivered reports with clinical precision. On the outside, he was the model employee. But inside, he was crumbling. And worst of all, Taehyung noticed. He noticed the way Jungkook's shoulders tensed whenever he entered a room. Noticed the way those bright brown eyes refused to meet his anymore. Noticed the way the younger man practically flinched when their fingers brushed accidentally over a document. It shouldn't have mattered. Taehyung had told himself it shouldn't matter. It was better this way. Safer. Cleaner. But the gnawing ache in his chest every time Jungkook walked past him without a word said otherwise. Late one evening, Taehyung sat alone in his office, nursing a glass of whiskey. The city outside glowed in the darkness, neon lights bleeding into the sky like bruises. He leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. It had been supposed to be a forgettable night. One mistake. One lapse of judgment. A kiss from a stranger. Rough hands dragging him into the backseat of a car. Breathless moans swallowed against heated skin. A night that should have been burned away by morning light. But instead, it clung to him like a curse. And now that stranger had a name. Now that stranger worked for him. Now that stranger avoided him like he was poison. Jungkook. Taehyung closed his eyes, remembering the feel of him, soft yet desperate, strong yet trembling, and felt his fists clench uselessly. It would have been easier if Jungkook had been angry. If he had confronted him, shouted, anything. But this cold politeness, this polite indifference, it was worse. It hollowed something out inside Taehyung that he hadn't even known existed. The next morning, Taehyung made a decision. He summoned Jungkook to his office under the pretense of needing clarification on a proposal. When Jungkook knocked and entered, carrying a folder stiffly in both hands, Taehyung felt the air in the room shift, tight, electric. "Sir?" Jungkook asked, keeping his gaze trained somewhere over Taehyung's left shoulder. Taehyung stared at him in silence for a moment too long. Jungkook fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable. He placed the folder neatly on the desk, ready to leave immediately. But Taehyung's voice stopped him. "Sit." Jungkook froze, then slowly lowered himself into the chair opposite the desk. The silence stretched between them. Taehyung's fingers tapped once against the wood. "I've noticed you've been distracted," he said finally, voice low. Jungkook stiffened. "I'm fine, sir." "Liar," Taehyung murmured. Jungkook's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists in his lap. "You told me to forget it." Jungkook said tightly. So I'm trying. The words hit Taehyung like a slap. He exhaled slowly, controlling the urge to reach across the desk, and he couldn't. He couldn't touch him. Not here. Not now. You're good at pretending, Taehyung said, almost admiringly. Jungkook's eyes flickered, finally meeting his for the briefest second, and in that second, Taehyung saw it. The hurt. The anger. The longing. It burned through him like wildfire. Before he could stop himself, Taehyung stood and circled the desk, coming to stand right in front of Jungkook's chair. Jungkook sat rigidly, refusing to look up. Taehyung leaned down, his voice dropping to a velvet whisper. Tell me, he said, you don't think about it. Jungkook's breath caught. Tell me you don't remember my hands on your skin. Tell me you don't remember the way you moaned my name into the night. Jungkook's fingers trembled where they gripped the arms of the chair. I don't, he rasped out. Liar. They both knew it. Taehyung straightened, dragging a slow, deliberate breath into his lungs. This, he said, voice cold again, can never happen again. Jungkook flinched, the words slicing deep. Taehyung hated himself for it. Hated the flicker of hurt in those wide brown eyes. But it was necessary. He had to protect himself. He had to protect both of them. Without another word, he walked back to his desk and sat down, flipping open the folder without even looking at Jungkook again. You're dismissed, he said, voice clipped. For a moment, Jungkook didn't move. Then, stiffly, silently, he rose and left the office. The door clicked shut behind him with a sound that felt final. Taehyung let his forehead fall into his hands. He had done the right thing. So why did it feel like he had just lost something he could never get back?